Now for reaction on the ruling and what it means for the fight against gender-based violence in the country. We are now joined by Brenda Madumise-Pajibo, the Director of WISE for Africa. Brenda, good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. 8 life sentences and 34 years. Your response to that sentence, and if you think it is sufficient and matching the crime.
Absolutely. Good evening, and thank you for having me. Absolutely. I mean, I think what this has done, I sent Andy a message earlier after the sentencing was read, just to say to her, listen, finally we are here. It took us a long time, over 11 years, 12 years to get to this point. But I think we can safely say that the sentence is fitting of the cruelty and the abhorrent crime committed and what she went through.
Yeah, I mean, it is quite a sentence, but the question, of course, becomes whether or not this is going to set an example, if you will, to how the criminal justice system needs to be treating cases of gender-based violence.
I think it's going to be. It's a step in the right direction. It's going to it's setting a tone that we're beginning to demonstrate our zero tolerance to these kinds of violence, gendered violence. We're also sending a message on impunity, where people think that they can get away with things. That once the law finds you and it starts to attend to the case, that there will be consequences, and consequences will be this kind of sentences that we receive. So it will serve as a deterrent to some, because now they realize that we are applying our minds. We having zero tolerance to these kinds of crimes, and that will mete out the toughest sentence ever.
Yeah, you know, one thing that you saw, of course, was Andy Kawa's daughter. After that sentence was handed down, really trying to speak to the convicted rapist. And she says, this is absolutely unacceptable. You can't even look at me. You don't even have the courage to look at me. You're staring at the newspaper. It's absolutely disgusting and unacceptable. And it's hard to deny just, you know, what this horrible trauma has done, not just to Andy, but certainly to the family. Yeah.
Yeah. And these are things, Naledi, that we don't speak about, that we don't openly talk about. When we talk trauma, I think we just fleetingly say it, but don't really deep thinking around it, what it does to the victim and survivor herself, but the entire family and the support system that she has gotten over the years, and what this has done to Andy's daughter, who had to live with a mother who is traumatized and had to relive this ordeal over and over again. We still have a case going with Andy on a legitimate award of compensation that she has received, that the South African Police Service is still dragging their feet in finalizing that and determining the quantum that needs to be paid out for the failure of the police to do what they were supposed to do. That is still outstanding. That matter is going to be heard in September. So she is still have to relive this thing over and over, and her family, her daughter in particular, has to go through this all the time.
I actually want to sit with the point that you're making around reliving the trauma over and over again. So for someone who perhaps hasn't suffered the trauma and really doesn't understand why this is such an important talking point, can we actually get through to that issue? That rape survivors need to repeatedly and almost endlessly go back to that very incident and that day.
Yeah, and that's the nature of the beast that we're dealing with, right? So once you lodge, you lay charges of rape or sexual assault, remember that the state relies on you to give the testimony that you're supposed to. So you are given the responsibility to give that testimony, right? And relive all of that, right? But you don't just relive in a court. You relive it with the doctors that the medical examiners that must examine you. You relive it with your therapies that you you go to, just to help you to give you the tools to survive on a daily basis. You relive it every time there is a rape case that you hear about, and you get triggered by what you see happening to those around you. So it's a constant trauma that when people say you must get up and get on with your life, it doesn't happen like that. And I think the sooner we understand that and appreciate and acknowledge that that is, victims and survivors don't work on our timeline, that they have their own timeline, and we need to give them the space and the grace for them to heal, the better for everybody else, and not to downplay their trauma, because you and I don't know it, don't understand it until it happens to one of us, right?
You know, the saddest part, I think, is that even while we look at this sentence of 8 life terms and 34 years for what Gqeberha has done, there is also the fact that this is one case that has seen a conviction and sentencing out of so many that simply fall through the cracks. And if you can assist us with some of that data, because, when you look at it, you've got, for instance, Rape Crisis that tries to collate the data, but what they come down to is from the moment of the incident taking place to just how many of cases are actually reported, how many are referred for prosecution, how many actually are accepted for prosecution, and all the way until we get to data that says how many actually get to a guilty verdict. There is a sense that that end of the line is well below 10%. Help us with the data just to clarify.
Well, it's dismal, and it will be dismal for a number of reasons, right? I don't have the numbers with me because we're busy doing that exercise, extrapolating that data based on the police stats when they report the crimes, right? So what South Africa needs to appreciate is that once you get the stats from the SAPS, that's not the true reflection of the rapes that are happening in the country, because mostly are not reported, because one is someone who has seen Andy's case and decided, if it has taken her that 12 years to get to this point, I don't want to be subjected to that. So I'd rather suffer in silence, right? So the majority of victims and survivors who do not report because they just don't want to be going through the ordeal and reliving the trauma all over again, right? So what gets reported on the rape cases that have been reported, the numbers are very high with what the SAPS has given us. Now, if you track them and see how many actually make it to a court, right? And then the number that makes it to court, and then the conviction, it's below 10% is very true, right? And I think we'll come back to you with the precise numbers, because we're doing that work at the moment, so that we give a true picture of what we're dealing with. What is good at the moment is that we do have a prevalence study that shows the levels of violence in this country, and so we've got that base data that helps us to understand. Now we can talk 1 in 5, 1 in 3, 1 in 10, because we've got that baseline data, right? So once we with that baseline data, we then start to look at with the reported cases with the South African Police Service, how many of those have had successful convictions is going to be telling, and South Africans are going to be surprised.
I think about just, as we listen to the trial, the harrowing details of what it was that Andy had to go through in that, absolutely horrific incident. And then there's the fact that after that, there's the process of the police then needing to take over the matter. And over the years, there's been some concerns around whether or not we have the skills that are necessary to deal with a highly traumatized victim. And not just the skills, but the resources, rape kits, the centers that are necessary. Talk to us about whether or not we're making any progress where that is concerned.
So, two things. So let's start with the rape kits. You will know that just after 2018, 2019, after the first gender-based violence summit, there was an outcry that we don't have the rape kids at the different police stations in this country. So, and that led to the minister then, Tele, coming up openly and telling us that there was a contractual matter with the lab, right? So the contracts had come to an end. So it tells you the contract management was non-existent. And so when you live in a country that does not prioritize things like those, you realize that we don't have credible leadership, right? Because you can't get to the end of a contract to realize that the contract has come to an end and you're going to have a shortage of rape kits. Now you need to scramble to find those rape kits to ensure that the victims of rape and sexual assault are not done hard on, right? So that's one issue. And we still have a backlog of the tests not being done, and that we can safely say that we have covered the backlog, and we with the new cases that are being processed, that are being processed urgently, swiftly, and promptly. So we still have the backlog. We still have challenges with the forensic lab. That's one aspect of it. The other part of this whole thing is around the expertise that is required to investigate matters such as these. These are very complex cases, right? Any rape case, any sexual assault case is complex in its nature. It does not, you taking a statement as a police officer, that's not enough, right? Once that statement has been given to you as a police officer, it must be given to someone who is properly trained with strong detective skills, to not ask the straight line questions, but to look at all the available evidence before them and investigate thoroughly so that you are certain of a conviction, right? It has been a challenge to ensure that that happens because they are stretched thinly, the South African Police Service, especially the detective units of the South African Police Service. We need to invest in all of that, arm them with the latest technologies, arm them with the latest methodologies so that they can do justice to some of these cases. We are falling behind, and it's something that must be given priority by the South African Police Service.
I want to ask what we need to be doing to ensure that even the process of appearing in court for a victim becomes more bearable, or at the very least protects the victim, shall I say survivor, in a better way. I mean, throughout the trial, one of the things we've heard from Gqeberha was how re-traumatizing this has been for her mother. I mean, can we make recommendations, or is that something that we simply just cannot get around, the invasiveness of that very process in court?
Listen, we've come a long way with what is allowed to be asked in a court of law in as far as sexual assault cases and rape cases are concerned. There was a time when your sexual history would be brought to light, and we have done away with that, right? And I think once you have an adversarial system like the one we have, where a defense is trying very hard to cast aspersion and your credibility as a witness, because they're fighting for their client, right? It's you as a judge sitting there to be able to ensure that that can be toned down and the harshness is minimized, right? And that's a responsibility of a judge or a magistrate to ensure that not that you mollycoddling a survivor, but you're ensuring that they're not made to feel like they are on trial themselves, and they don't make to fear the system itself and the proceedings themselves. So I think we need to do more and do better in ensuring that the proceedings in court, including the prosecutors, in how the prosecutors are supposed to be, ensuring that their clients are comfortable. The comfortability comes from how you as a prosecutor conduct the proceedings, right? The support that you need to give to the survivors from different organizations to ensure that they are mentally strong, they are physically strong, and they can withstand the cross-examination.
Yeah, lots to talk about, but thank you so much for your time, Brenda. We really do appreciate it on this day that we've seen what many will call a victory for Andy Kawa, where we saw Moses Gqesha, her rapist, sentenced to 8 life terms and 34 years. So Brenda Madumise-Pajibo is a director for Wise for Africa.